Hi, welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, a film programmer and cultural critic in Toronto, and this is The Other Thing I Did. My guest this week is Moritz Binder, a screenwriter whose work on the journalistic thriller September 5 has found him up for an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, sharing the nomination with director Tim Fellbaum and co-writer Alex David. The film is a gripping look at the ABC sports team covering the hostage crisis at the 1972 Munich Olympics, with vivid performances from Peter Sarsgaard, friend of the show, John Magaro, Ben Chaplin, and Leone Benish. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Moritz picked The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Sergio Leone's spectacular conclusion to his Dollars trilogy. Starring Clint Eastwood, Lee Van Cleef, and Eli Wallach as three gunmen who make a grudging alliance to search for a buried fortune as the Civil War rages all around them, it's a sprawling widescreen epic that cemented Leone's revisionist take on the Western as a grimy, sweaty, and entirely unpleasant genre filled with anti-heroes and scoundrels who might, under the right circumstances, find a way to be the good guys here or there. Although, as you'll hear, Moritz's initial experience of the film was a little less mythical. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I think it's on the number one of my favorite movies, and I think it will never disappear there because, you know, it's always what you bring to movies, and it's when you watch them for the first time. And sometimes it's so in your DNA that it feels already like almost like home, a movie. So I think it will be staying there forever, like on number one.
What was your first experience? I mean, neither of us had the chance to see it the first time around.
That's true. But my father did actually. And it was always around Eastern. I watched this movie every time around Eastern because when I was a kid in German television, the big movies, like the big old movies, always came around Eastern television, and it was always like Ben-Hur or like the Ten Commandments. Or what's the English? Yeah. Or like The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, for example. And my dad loved that movie, and he still loves it. And we watched it, and it was like, I remember because you have to know that in German television back then they cropped it on the sides because
Sure.
And he was always sitting in his chair and he was telling me what will happen on the left or the right side. I couldn't see, so that was always like part of it. And he's like, oh no, he's falling off his horse. You can't see that, but not like I really loved those afternoons, and it was. I don't know. It was maybe because it's one of his favorite three movies that I watched it so often that it became my number one. But it's I think the movie is an experience I don't have with other movies because it's the structure of the movie, the length of the movie. It gives it a feeling that it could go on forever and it would be okay. That would be okay. That's the only thing I don't like about the movie, that it ends, because it feels like they could go on their journey forever, those three, and you could watch them forever. And I love that in a way. I would say that's one really true epic movies I know in that sense.
It's funny, I'd never really approached it from that direction, but you're right. It is the quintessential Western in that it is all about the types that have been built up over 40 years of because this is 1966, I think.
Yeah.
So even if we go back to The Silence, it's only been 50 years of Western cinema. And the thing I always forget looking back at these movies is how fresh. I mean, I was going to say the scars of the American Civil War never really went away. Obviously, we're seeing that all over again. But the sense that this is still, there are people who would have gone to see this movie who were alive in the 1890s, right? Maybe not the 1860s, it's 100 years later, but it's still a relatively fresh memory. You always forget how close and how far all these things are. I mean, we're basically 60 years ahead now from Leone's trilogy, but the pieces he was working with, the characters and the stereotypes he was playing with, I mean, it is literally called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, just so we have no difficulty understanding just how simple everything is. But it's all, I mean, that's the thing that Leone's films did in the first place with A Fistful of Dollars. He was adapting, a Kurosawa film into the West and
Yeah.
into the American West and redefining the American Western doing it.
Yes.
And just a couple of years later, here's this gargantuan, sprawling 3-hour epic. And yeah, when you said that you'd watched it on television, of course, my first thought was 4:3. Oh my God, that's how we saw it too. That was the VHS version with an electronic pan
Yes.
swiveling across the screen
Yes.
because that's how old the tech was.
Yeah.
But this is a proper gargantuan, Lawrence of Arabia is 4 years before this.
Yes.
The audiences had been accustomed to seeing giant films, and then to collapse them down onto a television set and still have it play for you and for me 20, 30 years later, it's kind of wonderful. That's just how clear and strong the storytelling is.
Yes. Yeah.
Even before we get to the acting and the structure and construction.
No, you're totally right. I think because it touches, it doesn't, it's not didactic. It's not about like making a strong point about anything. It's just raising feelings that I think people had during like all centuries or like all time. Is like, is there some form of the absurdity of like this blind idealism that is happening within a war, told through like the perspective of three scoundrels that don't have like an following some ideal, or it's just following their own greed, but their naive open eyes saying this is, I think when they look at that war, they're saying that makes no sense, and that's kind of that's a refreshing approach of those people saying that makes no sense, and they're totally right. It doesn't make like this the scene with the bridge and the two sides are like slaughtering each other over that bridge. It doesn't make sense, and I think he chose a very good perspective because we follow them on their like very selfish journey, touching a very bigger topic, and I think that is why it ages so well, because it's not didactic.
Yeah, they see opportunity. They don't see morality. That is, I think, the genius too of the entire trilogy is the way it sort of sharpens Clint Eastwood's character, the man with no name. Here he's Blondie, because I think Tuco is also a nickname. Nobody has their own name in this thing. They have abandoned all pretense to identity to just embrace profiteering and avarice. And the fact that these three characters can work together uneasily, all knowing that they're going to betray each other. Like, it's the opposite of the Treasure of the Sierra Madre, where everyone sets out as a partnership. This is all just, no, I'm going to kill you the minute you turn your back. And so is he, and so are you, and we all know it. And that brings out something really freeing, I think, in like Eli Wallach is just the jester for all of this, just constantly telling us just how terrible everyone is to everyone else. But it slowly brings out, Eastwood and Van Cleef were cast because they have one face, right? They're not expressive actors. But slowly over the time that we spend with them, you see them, like Eastwood starts smiling more and they start warming up. And Van Cleef has this great ironic presence where he's accepting everything, all the insults, they just roll off of his back because I'll kill you later. It won't be a big deal. And so it's fun, right? It is fun to watch one of the most horrific periods of American history through these guys on the outside of it.
And I think what Leone does is he always finds like specific moments, and this is something that I still try to find an opportunity in my work to find the space for situations and moments. I mean, talking about people eating or sitting down, like I only rewatch it like once a year. I haven't rewatched it now, but I just watched the scene where Angel Eyes is sitting down eating the stew, like in the beginning, and in 3 minutes or like even more, just eating. And then when you think not something will happen, he takes the bread and the knife and he just slices the bread up and eats the bread off his knife. And it's about, I think the only other movie I now like thinking of uses food like this was, or at least I thought of it, was like All Quiet on the Western Front, because the way like Edward Berger used food there was like showing the difference or the development from life to barely existing, like living, existing, when in the end they're just eating raw eggs to exist, and in the beginning they try to eat a proper meal. And
Mm.
it's kind of the same thing. They're like on a journey, and it's kind of the motor of the story is to get that money, but it's about dealing with situations and sometimes like embracing the moment. And the movie embraces the moment so much. And this is something that I really love, because I think there would have been a way to make it like with a faster pace and getting my like more the story faster. But he takes his time with certain moments, and that makes it so poetically. I would say that makes it almost like an opera.
Oh, very much so. I'm thinking about the opening scene of Once Upon a Time in the West, which just takes what, 9 minutes
Yeah,
of nothing
yeah,
and
yeah,
turns it into a study of character and how
yeah,
people deal with boredom and how people deal with
yeah.
waiting. Um, you could almost say that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is all about waiting, because it's all about
Yes,
the destination, but it's not, because Leone keeps finding other ways for the characters to define themselves to us, even in isolation from each other, right? We see that, Tuco's falling out with his brother over
yeah,
religion and faith and
yeah,
what it is to live, well, maybe not an agnostic life. I don't think Tuco would describe himself as anything other than just angry.
yeah,
But all of that runs through his immorality comes from somewhere. You can see why he chose to renounce maybe even dignity and just
yeah,
live. I mean, he's of the three, he's the one who's just sort of the most comfortable living in the dirt, like a
yeah,
badger or a mole. He
yeah,
embraces
yeah,
all of it. He's lusty in every sense of the word. Whereas Blondie and Angel Eyes are both a little too clean, I think, right? Like they haven't
yeah. That's true.
they're image conscious. They are aware of how they appear to others. It's part of the whole gunfighter thing,
Yeah,
right? They need to intimidate simply by existing. But there's also a lot of things they've cut themselves off from that
that's
Tuco
true.
gets to enjoy, even just in a fleeting moment, because he's not concerned with. He literally, I don't think has, rather, no, that's not fair. I was going to say he has no self-awareness. He's completely self-aware to the point where he doesn't care if other people are aware of him,
Yeah, that's true.
just as long as he
I
gets the
think,
last straw.
yeah, you're totally right. I think the line that characterizes him most is when he's in this bath tube and this guy from the beginning shows up and talking about his revenge, and then he shots him out of the bath tube and said, "If you want to shoot, shoot, don't talk." I mean, that's basically he's in the moment the whole time. He's in the moment, and I think Leone said that they are all three like like representatives of his, like sides of him,
Mm.
aspects of him. But Tuco, obviously, he said that's his heart, or that is like his instinct, and and the performance of those three. I mean, it's unbelievable how in the final scene, like the final scene at the graveyard where like they're this Mexican standoff, you followed them so long, and you could, I mean, at least me, I could watch this for hours. They're just standing there, and Morricone in the soundtrack does that too, because it builds up and it builds up, and suddenly it's almost like, okay, I think they will stand there forever, and this is the final picture. They're just standing there, and um that's something that makes it so big and real, and it's something I don't experience with other movies, that it's three characters that could just stand there forever, and I would be totally fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, The Italian Job is the same year, I think, and that's the film that ends without resolution.
Yes,
It's in the air, right?
yes,
It was
yes,
in the zeitgeist. You could have gotten away. I think. Yeah, I mean, I do think Leone could have gotten away with it, but then people would want another one,
yeah,
and
that's true.
he was
That's
done,
true.
I find fascinating too. Like this is a director who, in the space of what 2.5 years of
Yeah, yeah,
accounting
yeah,
for production time, said everything he had to say
yeah,
about this sort of western, and then immediately saw other
yeah,
vistas ahead of him, and says it all in what 6 hours, six and a half hours all in,
Yeah.
and turns Clint Eastwood into one of the biggest stars in the world. He'd been a cowboy actor on television on Rawhide, which, I mean, he's fine in it, but his career wasn't going anywhere until he decided to leave America and try his luck with this guy. And all of a sudden, it's John Wayne in Stagecoach, right? He'd been around, but until you see the Ringo Kid standing atop, you know, like as the camera pulls up to him in that movie, John Ford makes John Wayne, and Leone right from the beginning, to the point where when he shows up in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, everyone is on his side. Everyone's excited. That's why they're there. They don't care about the running time or the fact that there are other people in it. They want to see what he'll do next.
Yes.
And I don't know that there has ever been a more perfect moment for a movie star than Eastwood in this trilogy. I mean, it starts with A Fistful of Dollars, but by the time he got to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, he had enough say over the character and the performance that he could push back against some of Leone's suggestions, and they shaped it together into something truly incredibly iconic. I love them all. But I find nowadays anyway, when I watch the film, I watch Eastwood. I just want to see what he'll squint at, where he'll turn, how he handles himself. It's just an incredible naturalistic performance in the middle of this great big heightened period Western action thing.
That's true. And they didn't make the mistake of explaining too much. I think if you see, like, if you say that, that's a third film, and if you see him as always the same guy in the three films, you can tend in giving him some context or something, but they did the opposite. I think what Leone did is, and I read that somewhere, it's not my sentence, but he always found faces and landscapes. Like he showed landscapes like a close up of a face, and he showed faces like landscapes. And and I think they did it perfect. I mean, that's basically the first shot. You see the landscape, and then the face of that guy comes in, and you hear that coyote, which is like the origin of that iconic soundtrack. But giving merging landscapes and faces into each other. This is why I think you never get tired of watching Eastwood in those movies, because you always try to get behind, into his brain, because you can spend hours just watching his face. And then there's Lee Van Cleef with the eyes that make burning little holes in the canvas, and you have and then you have Tuco, and that's why that last Mexican standoff is so great, because you don't want one of those faces to disappear. You don't want anyone to die. You just want to watch those faces for the rest of your life, and that's something. And it goes with every frame of that movie is that's what's really interesting to me, is that every frame of that movie could hang in an art gallery. It's like a big oil painting, but you're never too caught up in the frames. You're not too caught up in how the camera captures it. You're always in the story, and this is something. And I think because it keeps moving and moving and moving and moving, this is why you're still in that story, because it's. And haven't seen it I don't know how many times, it's still a relief when they move on from one situation to the next. And it is something that's almost like a metaphor for life. If you're in one situation, you kind of know that you will move to the next at a certain point eventually. And that's something that really connects with me when I watched it. And I watched it as a kid. Now I watch it as a screenwriter, and it's always a different movie. And I have to say, that's one thing that most people don't know, that in Germany, obviously I watched the dub version on television, and there was a very horrific fashion back then, that when the Germans dubbed Western, they made them funny, which is you wouldn't believe. It's really, they try to sneak in comic reliefs. So when you watch, I mean, it starts with the title. The title obviously is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, right? In Germany, it's not. It's called The Two Glorious Scoundrels, the two, because they wanted to sell it like an odd couple thing, which makes no sense. And if and if you have like scenes, for example, when Angel Eyes is getting the information from the soldier that has lost his legs, and he goes into the saloon, that's where the scene ends in the original version. But in Germany, you can hear like a joke from within the saloon. I say, "Can you handle me the whiskey down?" And they always try to sneak in jokes,
Right.
because they were afraid that it would be too boring. So that means for me, not only seeing it in scope for the first time, but also seeing it in original language for the first time. This is where it really hits me the second time, because the first time I was intrigued about the story, the characters. I mean, it was a fascinating story anyway, even with those silly jokes in German. But then when I saw it the first time in English, that was like, this is a real, like a heavy story, and has like some gravitas, and it's that I remember that moment that when I thought, okay, this is not a good movie. This is maybe the best movie. I was really was falling in love for the second time there. Yeah.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I wrote about 2 new catalog releases from Arrow Video, a 4K edition of Alfred Soul's Catholic slasher Alice Sweet Alice, and a Blu-ray double feature of Kazuo Mori's 60s crime pictures, A Certain Killer and A Killer's Key. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io, or find a link in the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. I don't think I've ever had that kind of experience, completely re-experiencing a film in the initial, like, I'm short of a director's cut or something like that, where something can be restored or given back to you. But this, I can't. Oh God! I mean, I knew about the practice of dubbing. We had it here too for a while, but not at the same scale. It would just be, the English language dubs prepared for theatrical release at the time, which were, if anything, just flat. They didn't try to recontextualize that film as a comedy.
It's crazy. It was like the studios or the distributors who were afraid that it will fall flat if it's too quiet or if it's too dry, which is the quality of the movie. But that's a crime, I have to say. But I mean, for me now, in hindsight, it shows me the quality of the movie that I no matter what, fell in love with it. So there is so much in it that you can't destroy, even by trying to destroy it. And I remember when I was my first year at film school, I think it's the second shot of the movie where he's just looking down the street and there's a dog running full frame, like from one end to the other end. And I was remembering this, that you have to have like the courage to show a frame with a dog where the dog is running through the whole frame. So I tried my first film at the film university. I tried to explore this, and I did a short film where a guy is running through the frames like over and over again, because just to experience time. It was a terrible, terrible movie I did. But the thing is, I saw how that you have to be a master to take the time with some frames and then go on with the story. That is something like the rhythm to the movie. That is something I think you cannot watch it too often to lecture yourself or to like educate yourself about rhythm in storytelling. There's this, and obviously, I mean, Ennio Morricone is giving this rhythm like a soul. But that's I think the movie is a masterclass in many things, and it's still not a movie that you like try to brag about in film school. It's still an entertaining film that is not just that you don't feel like watching art, even if you're watching art. And this is something that is achieved rarely, I think.
Oh, I agree. For years and years, I have been as a critic, as a fan, as an audience member, I have been trying to make the case for Jaws, Spielberg's
Yeah,
Jaws, as
yeah,
maybe the greatest American
yeah,
film, because
absolutely.
watching it now and realizing how deliberate that first hour is, just because
Yeah,
the puppets didn't work, right? The shark
yeah,
didn't work, and
yes, yeah, yeah,
they
yeah,
had
yeah.
to write it. They had to create all of this
Yes,
density around Amity
yeah,
and the politics and the local stuff and the little bits and pieces for the characters to do. We did a little video thing when I started at TIFF, because it was we programmed it for a digital shelf, and we did this little 5 minute. This is why Jaws is a masterpiece.
yes,
And I took a shot of the town hall meeting with
yeah,
everybody arguing in turn, and I just said, someday I'm going to tell people this is an Altman movie,
yeah,
because it has that level
yes,
of attention to detail, but
yes,
because it is a spectacular genre work, because it is this
yeah,
incredible work of suspense and horror and clockwork cinema, and because it's a giant blockbuster, people don't put it on the same footing as The Godfather or The Conversation or any of
that's
the
a
other
shame.
films.
Yeah, that's a shame. I totally agree because just because you feel entertained, it doesn't mean. I mean, and true art always gives you the room for reflection. I mean, you bring a lot to a movie every time,
Of course.
but if you have like the room to reflect while being entertained, I think that's one of the highest achievements you can make as a filmmaker. That somebody feels entertained, but asks themselves questions or starts to reflect about something. That's that's something that's achieved rarely. And I have to say, Jaws absolutely is a great masterpiece. And it's exactly because of what you don't see and how the movie handles that. I mean, we're talking about Spielberg. It's obvious that it's a masterpiece. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it too. In the rear view, you can point to what Leone does in his trilogy and what Spielberg does in Jaws. And now I think we're starting to see it. Well, I guess it's been going on for the last few years, but with Quaron and Children of Men, the way that is
Yes.
essentially an adventure picture, but it is the most relevant film of this millennium
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
far. And you can see the work and the craft that goes into it years later, once it stops thrilling you, right? Once you're able to approach it intellectually as a construct, as a piece of art, as a piece of cinema.
Yeah.
And especially in the older films where, I mean, you have to remind people that there's no CG in these things. Like the
Yes.
Leone shot in the desert with that, all of that is real. All of the extras are real. All of the costumes are real. They had to build the whole damn thing.
Yeah. Sometimes it's too real even. I remember seeing the behind the scenes where they shot with the train and I think it was Eli Wallach lying down and the train appearing, and they said, no, yeah, you have enough headroom. You don't be like you don't be in danger. But what they forgot is that there are like these little boards that help you get into the door, and they're like a little bit more down to the, and it was really close to his head.
Yeah.
It was a real train driving there, and it was really close to his head. And even like this is, I think this is the most famous thing the thing with the bridge where they blow up the bridge, and they had to do it twice because there are two versions of the legend. I know the one is that the cameras were too close the first time and blew up with the whole bridge, and the second one I heard, and I don't know if it's true, that the mayor of the city wanted to blow up the bridge because it was like he gave his allowance that they do it, and he was blowing it up when they said uh, get ready. Like everybody was like,
Oh, he jumped the
and he
gun.
was already, yeah, he already blew it up because he didn't wait for action, so they didn't cover it. But they, nevertheless, what the reason was, they had to rebuild the whole bridge and go back there and redo the shooting. And I mean, that's very nerdy, but in a way you can feel that even the cemetery at the end, this Sad Hill Cemetery, was built by the Spanish army. It was all there, and there is something about that it was all there that you can feel because it's so gritty and real, the whole thing. And sometimes there's a fly in the framing, like flying on a lip or on the forehead, and you don't know if it's on purpose, but it's just because they're really sweating there, that's really they're in that environment, and somehow like the reality sneaks into the narrative and gives it like the second layer, and it's yeah, that's something I really love about it.
Yeah. And recreating a period of time, a specific stylized period of time, the way he does it is so just it's uncanny in the best way, because it's not Mexico, it's not America, it's Spain. It's completely
Yeah,
unconvincing on a couple of
yeah,
levels, but
true.
it doesn't matter because that's what's in the frame. We're there with, Clint Eastwood. It's obviously American. Therefore, this is all
Yeah,
really happening. It's the
yeah,
suspension of disbelief becomes part of the fun,
yeah,
where you're watching somebody give you their version of a Hollywood Western,
yeah.
which is, with a handful of exceptions, a more exquisite and considered realization. Because those films were, I mean, by and large, and I mean no offense to any American Westerns that people might be thinking about while listening to this, there are plenty of great ones. Eastwood's made a
Yes.
few. There's stuff that dates back to the 20s where they
Yes.
they shape the concept of the genre as you're watching it and experience it. But when you have something like this, when Leone's versions become canon, they reinvent the reinventions and show
Yeah.
you what is possible from an outsider's
Hmm.
point of view. It's like, well, what if we didn't have to worry about the specific locations, or you weren't stuck in Monument Valley for every shoot?
Yeah.
Take it somewhere else, open it up, show us what else is possible, and then just never stop, which is the
Yeah.
thing that I find the most thrilling about all three of his films, is like he just keeps inventing
Yeah.
new pieces of this thing he loves. And weirdly enough, that kind of brings me to September 5.
Oh, well,
In
okay.
well, in that you have to imagine the story that you're telling in a new way. Otherwise, it is just
Mm,
every other movie about people in a television studio that
mm,
we know
mm,
what that looks like. We know what we've already seen that. The thing that grabbed me right away about September 5 is that it has a it has an immediacy. It makes us understand, like, it's in journalism we call it a TikTok when you're retelling a story,
mm,
and TikTok of
mm.
course no longer means that anymore, but
Yeah.
the sense that moment by moment everything that is happening that we see, we're seeing the stuff that matters,
Yeah.
which just builds and builds and builds. But then what September 5 does is it introduces all the morality and all the complexity, and basically it's a communique with the future, because we know, not necessarily, like, there are members in the audience who don't know how Munich ended up,
Mm, mm,
but there are people who understand what the ramifications of the decisions of a television broadcast crew during this
mm.
crisis would do, and what the ramifications would be, and where we've ended up is inescapable. And that's the thing that absolutely thrilled me watching them film, is that we're watching a movie tell us what's coming, even though
Mm.
none of the people in it have the slightest idea. And they don't even care, because it's not important. It's not the crisis before them.
Yeah.
But by having them focus on this thing, it opens up the box on the other side, and we in the audience get to have the moral conversation that the characters can't.
I really love that and that's really flattering. Thank you so much. No,
No, not at
because
all.
I think that's exactly what I like about movies, if when they keep questions alive. I think if you're giving too many answers, you're killing the questions, and everybody's going home and say, okay, we solved that. It's like, and now we have dinner. But if you're not solving it for the audience, you're keeping the questions alive. But I think what Tim did there is that it's still thrilling. Like, it's in a way also entertaining, because you're feeling the pressure. You're sitting in that room, and then you go home with questions. And I think that's something that he did achieve also by taking everything so serious, like what they did that day work wise. It was also, everything was there, everything was in the room, everything worked. The monitors worked, the machines worked. So it was like also reality getting into the narrative in some way. Like, and he was moving around with Marcus, the DP, like a documentary team. And I think that gives it such a feeling of being in a certain moment, that maybe makes the bridge into the future, that okay, I see a certain moment, this moment has to mean something for the future. If I'm exploring this moment so detailed, that has to mean something for the future. And then I think the questions or the thinking starts. And yeah, that's but I've never thought that I would hear September 5 in the context of the good, the bad, and the ugly, but that's really flattering. Thank you. Thank you,
Well,
Norm.
yeah, you're taking us somewhere that, much like any great film, whether it's documentary based, docudrama, or completely fiction, you're taking us somewhere we've never been. And through the experience of watching the film, you're led to the epiphanies of, where we are now, and what television and what journalism can do together, and then would fail to do subsequently. Because I mean, that's the other thing too. The casting is John Magaro as someone who sweats truth, right? Like, who's panicking about honesty and integrity. And Sarsgaard's version of Rune Arledge is just someone who's already exhausted from having these conversations that he knows he's going to have with the network, right? Like, he's the bulwark. But each one of them presents a separate perspective on both now and then, without ever bring it. How do you strike that balance on the page?
That's a good question. I think we always tried not to judge. That's the thing. We always tried to take every little obstacle they had very seriously, and whether it's a technical issue or it's an ethical issue, everything was treated like the same, because it felt the same to them that day, because it was everything they had to handle was leading to get the broadcast done. And I think that was one review in Germany that I really liked, is when they wrote just one sentence that they said, normally if you have movies about journalists, it's either a hero story or it's criticism, and this is in between. It feels like real people trying to do something right, not knowing about the consequences. And I think the first part, this real people, like real journalists trying to do something, that's because we took the moment so seriously. Like, it's not about what's happening in 5 weeks. It's, can we push out the camera now? Do we have enough cable for that? It's like, and if you I think if you take the moment serious, the audience can rely to the characters as real people in a way. And this is what almost every Western does, I have to say. Like, every river they have to cross, they really have to cross that river. How are they crossing that river? So it's human. It's like real people trying to get over that river, and not trying to get the treasure. They will try to get that treasure, but it's now about the river. It's now about getting a horse because the other horse died, or whatsoever, or they are hungry, now they need food. And I love that. I love that it's about the small obstacles when it's about something bigger. And this is, I think, when a narrative takes the bigger picture seriously, it tells the small things very precisely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was thinking the other comparison I was going to make about between September 5 and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is that they are both films about people just trying to get their thing done in the middle of a war.
Yeah.
And the luxury of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is that it has the time to make us forget the war, because it's however many days or weeks this trip is taking, they're consciously avoiding conflict. That only once or twice do they actually run into garrisons and the military. And in September 5, just by definition, it's today. Like, there is no, you can't avoid anything. You can't put the decisions off. They are forced to, as you say, to just every single decision is pushing them further and further to the goal, because there really is, like, they are on a freight train. There is no way off this thing other than the end of the crisis. And that sort of pressure cooker atmosphere played out in a tiny space where maybe they're not sweating for real, but you believe it. You can actually see the accumulated pressure and stress on them. Weirdly enough, that was the thing that I thought of. These are both movies about people who would really rather not be anywhere near this. They came to do one thing, and the world will not let them just cover, in this case, just cover the games. They're part of the crisis. As soon as it starts, they just don't know it.
Yeah. It's all about reacting. Yeah, you're right. And I mean, this could be also really boring if you watch people react in circumstances. But I think it's in both versions. It's really important that the world feels real, that it feels, because if you don't feel like settled in the environment, or if you don't feel in both films, like if you don't smell the sweat, you won't care. And maybe that's the thing. And this is what I always say. I mean, I really love my script because I'm kind of proud that it worked out so well. But how Tim and how everybody like involved created it, like the world, like the studio was completely built, and I was there every day on set. Even like the pans in the background were from the 70s, so the camera could show everything. Like there wasn't like a corner they couldn't show. So you felt like a time traveler sitting there on set, because everybody in costume, the whole studio, even the ceiling was there. Even if you looked up, there was a ceiling. So you were in the studio of the 70s, and they moved around, and it felt so real. And I think what really helped was the original material of Jim McKay, because was what the cast always says, that it really helped them to not go over that, because they had like this real person reacting on the events, so they didn't try to be more emotional than him. In the end, I like my script, but they really took it so seriously that it felt real. And I think this physical approach was the key to the movie.
It's what George Miller said about Fury Road, right? Real people, real cars, real desert.
Yes.
Everything else follows from that.
Yeah.
I usually wrap the episode by asking the guest whether there's something from the film they chose that's influenced their work. We've sort of touched on it with Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but is there anything else of yours that has drawn on it more directly, or would you want to write a big epic Western?
I did, but it's in the drawer. I wrote one, a German one, which is, if you know Leone's movies, you can smell the copycat. Like, it's really, but I would love to write a Western one, because it's so pure. It's everything we've spoken about. It's not about the bigger goal. It's always about the details and about the next obstacle. And I would love to do that, but that's the point. There are like Westerns in the film history that like it's unreachable. I mean, if you think of Unforgiven, or like, I think the genre, it's one of the oldest of like I mean, with the great train robbery, and like, it's one of the oldest genres in film history. But I think there were so many masters doing them. I don't know what I can provide to that genre, but I would love the experience. I would love to experience it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to make the best one. You just have to make a good one.
Okay, I try it. That's a good, yeah. Maybe I try that.
My thanks to Moritz Binder, who finds out if he's won an Oscar on Sunday, March 2nd. In the meantime, September 5 arrives on Blu-ray and DVD today from Paramount Home Entertainment, and it's also available on digital and on demand. Thanks also to Emily Lou Aldrich. She knows what she did. You can find Moritz on Instagram at moritz.binder, and you can find The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly on 4K and Blu-ray from Kino Lorber Home Entertainment. It's also streaming on the MGM Amazon channel in Canada and on MGM Plus and Fubo in the US, and available to rent or buy on various VOD services in the US and Canada. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 41 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster as soon as you can. I'll see you next week.